Hey folks, great to see you. Merry Christmas Eve. Hopefully we're having a wonderful day out there. And boy, oh boy, is the forecast getting interesting on down the road here as we start looking ahead to 2025. January is beginning to look like a month that could be quite active for someone in the United States. And I mean wintry kind of active with potential for winter storms and Arctic air through portions of the lower 48. And I'm going to break all of that down for you in today's video, tell you who has the best shot at seeing that wintry weather and what kind of impacts that could bring to your neck of the woods. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology student at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and I'd appreciate it if you go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell for the latest notifications, like the video, and of course, comment, let me know where you're watching from. Alrighty folks, with that said, let's go ahead and dive on into things and start talking weather. And per usual, we will start with satellite imagery, and you can see currently on satellite loop a couple of active areas. In fact, look at the storm up into the Pacific Northwest, absolutely cranking just off the west coast of Canada. Very impressive storm system there, bringing plenty of active weather into the northwestern part of the country. But those are not the only places seeing that active weather. A nice little storm system here in the northeast, bringing an active band of some precipitation. Kind of a couple areas of energy combining here on satellite to bring potential snow and ice into the northeast and even portions of the mid-Atlantic, and then a severe weather threat this afternoon and evening back down towards portions of Texas. So we really are seeing it all this Christmas Eve, and many folks definitely going to start to feel that active weather. Now, as for radar, you can see this kind of also pretty well on this map. We'll go ahead and start in the northeast where plenty of snow is falling through much of Maine, back down into Vermont, New Hampshire, and then even our friends up into Massachusetts, Connecticut, and check this out, even the I-95 corridor from New York City all the way back down to Philadelphia, even Baltimore and surrounding areas, even kind of clipping the DC area, picking up on some snow this Christmas Eve morning, and you really couldn't draw it up much better, could you here, as probably one of the better times of the year to see some flakes fly, and luckily, not a huge impact event, although for the morning commute, probably definitely causing issues in the I-95 from, again, really, we'll say, honestly, Boston all the way down, because this will work through the Boston area next, seeing that active weather. So definitely let me know how much snow has accumulated in your neck of the woods in this part of the country. I would love to hear those reports as we are kind of rounding out this storm system and it is beginning to pull away later this afternoon. Now, other than that, another little area of low pressure down off the southeast coastline. And this one could be producing just a little bit of freezing drizzle in and around the Rocky Mount area. So also would love your reports here in North Carolina if you are seeing any frozen precipitation, or if you're lucky enough to just get a good old-fashioned Christmas Eve rain, which unfortunately many folks are definitely getting that, other than the ice, which I guess is actually probably better, rather that you're getting the rain over the ice here this morning. Now, other than that, big old storm system cranking up here into the southern plains, Oklahoma City, back into the Ozarks, seeing that active weather here as we're starting our Tuesday. And this will really crank up this afternoon and overnight tonight with a severe weather threat back from Dallas, San Antonio, and over to the Houston area. And then to round things off out west, we do have plenty of rain falling from San Francisco, Sacramento, all the way north into Washington and Oregon, where we are even seeing some snow falling in those higher elevations. Now, watches, warnings, advisories, yeah, we kind of got it all here due to this snow up into the northeast. In fact, winter storm warnings for a couple isolated places into Maine and back into portions of Vermont. And then winter weather advisories through the rest of those states, or at least portions of those states there in the pink, and even some winter weather advisories. Check this out, all the way down into DC, up to Philadelphia, clipping portions of northern Delaware here, and then into the mountains of West Virginia, and even up into portions of Pennsylvania. And then special weather statements for light snowfall accumulations throughout really just about the entire state of New Jersey, outside of those of you in the winter weather advisory, up to New York City, Hartford, Providence, and even Boston and Albany getting in on those advisories. So definitely a wintry scene here to start off your Christmas Eve plans, and definitely would, again, like I said earlier, love to hear those reports on how much snow you've picked up out wherever you are watching from. And then kind of a gap in the middle part of the country with no direct impacts, at least worthy of criteria that would issue some sort of advisory or warning. And then out west, obviously things getting a bit more active out that way, from California up into Oregon and Washington State. All right, let's kind of talk about the energy that's flying out around there just a little bit here and kind of time it out for you the rest of the day. And a potent little trough here into the northeast, that's what's producing all of this lift and getting our little skinny band of precipitation, more than just a skinny band up into portions of Maine and Vermont. That's why we have those winter storm warnings in effect for you folks, where we have just a little bit more lift that is helping to produce more precipitation. But you see this little skinny area of vorticity from Boston all the way back down into Philly. That's that slight but potent band of snow currently working on through the I-95 corridor. Now, other than that, again, a little bit of vorticity off the southeast coastline. That's bringing that storm system we mentioned. And then we have a much larger trough, and I'll tell you, kind of an interesting looking trough here. Very amplified, we'll say, as you see this big vorticity, kind of the string of it getting all the way up from Canada and then diving down into Texas. That's what's going to potentially produce some severe weather during the evening hours right here into the diverging side of that trough, and that's going to create ascent and lift. And going to help to bring plenty of thunderstorms overnight tonight. And then same thing out west, another trough out here, producing a whole bunch of lift, and that's what's causing all of that precipitation to fall. Now, as we go through the next couple of days, what's going to happen is our little northeast piece of energy is going to get on out of here. And then I really think this piece of energy out into the plains is going to become the bigger topic, and our Pacific energy as well, as those two will then begin to slowly but surely cross the country throughout your Wednesday here into Christmas Day. And then after that, even into Thursday, this new area of energy from the Pacific that gets into the plains, that absolutely could produce a bit of a severe weather threat as we go into your Thursday afternoon, and more little pieces of energy continuing to work across the country, and all of them going to have the chance to produce some severe weather here over the extended range. Now, going ahead and kind of diving on into today's severe weather threat, because there is one, not a big one, but a marginal risk from Dallas over towards Longview, Tyler, all the way into Galveston, Houston, and then back down into the Corpus Christi area. This does also include Austin and San Antonio, so all the big population centers here in Texas under the threat for a couple strong to severe storms overnight tonight. And the main threat will be wind and hail, and this is the tornado threat. You notice nothing showing up. Not a huge threat, but something obviously to always keep an eye on. But wind here shown, and then hail as well, also shown, going to be the bigger threats today, and really overnight tonight, bigger than this afternoon, I think, for many folks. All right, let's go ahead and time out the next day or two for you, get you through the holiday, and then we'll kind of look at the extended range, finish talking up about the severe weather pattern, and then we'll get to the exciting stuff and start breaking down that big pattern change potentially going into 2024. And I'll tell you who has the best chance at getting some big time winter weather across the lower 48. Now, as of right now, like we saw on radar, we'll move this ahead just a little bit. Here's that skinny band of snow in the northeast, and then rain kind of elsewhere through portions of the southeast. Is going to make for not the best holiday out there, I think, but could definitely be worse for many folks. Now, as for the snow in the northeast, going to really clear out throughout the day, and by the time we get to this afternoon, this is about 1 p.m. Eastern, any snow that is currently falling should be moving out of here, except for maybe the extreme downeaster portions of Maine could see a little bit more snow, but definitely kind of a small area there, and not many folks going to be impacted by that. Now, through the rest of today, rain showers continue into the eastern Carolinas. Rain continues this afternoon and evening back through Missouri, Arkansas, East Texas, even into portions of Oklahoma and Louisiana. And it's at this point, as about the time the sun is going down, that low-level jet begins to crank up here, and a severe weather threat likely to crank up into that threat area in Texas that we looked at for your Christmas Eve. And then we'll go through the rest of tonight. Kind of as you're finishing up any last Christmas Eve events. We'll get towards about midnight tonight, and you'll notice definitely a pretty feisty little line of storms here extending into that threat area of Texas. That's why strong winds and hail will be the main threat. And through the rest of the night, that could definitely continue to produce quite the thunder and lightning show. Definitely probably lighten up the sky pretty good overnight. And then as we're waking up Wednesday morning, that line of storms begins to work off into the Gulf of Mexico, and becomes, I guess, a problem for the fish out there, and of course any fishermen working their Christmas morning. And then we'll get through Christmas afternoon here, and a bit more of a quiet day, I think, tomorrow, but still some scattered showers working on through Louisiana, Arkansas, up through the Ozarks, even into the St. Louis area potentially, as far north there as southern Indiana and Illinois. picking up on showers your Christmas afternoon, and that kind of continues into Christmas evening. Now, let's go ahead and zoom this out a little bit because I think there's more to be said about this overall pattern for potential severe weather between now and we'll say New Year's or so. Is whenever we're going to have the highest risk of it. So the overall setup for it is shown below. This is Christmas Eve, or excuse me, Christmas evening rather, the afternoon of Christmas into the overnight. The kind of overall setup is going to be a big ridge building into the east, and notice this trough. This is the same Pacific storm that is currently happening. Will eventually get into the Four Corners, and as that happens, we're likely going to see a trough ejection into the southern plains. And basically, the problem with that is this ridge. It's going to be producing plenty of warm Gulf air being transported or advected northward. That's going to destabilize the atmosphere, and as we get that forced descent over this from our trough of low pressure, you better bet we're going to run some severe weather risks into the time period after Christmas. There's one trough that could do it, and then you notice another little trough developing by Friday afternoon that could also produce severe weather. And I think really the main areas that are going to be under the gun here are in the southern sections of the country: Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, potentially trying to get into Dixie Alley by this coming weekend. But for you folks up north into the Midwest, the northern plains, and into the Northeast, not really expecting a severe weather threat here, and you wouldn't expect that really this time of year. So good news for you, but not such great news for our friends down south who absolutely could run the risk of severe weather. You'll notice these troughs kind of just keep on coming and keep on coming until early next week. It's this trough right here that I think is going to initiate our upcoming pattern change. But before we get there, let's go ahead and break down the severe weather just a little bit more here. Storm Prediction Center has issued a risk for day 3. So this is going to be your Thursday, the day after Christmas, the 26th. And they've already got a slight risk up here for Shreveport, Longview, Tyler, Texas, back down into College Station and into the northern Houston suburbs. For that potential of strong to severe storms, but this will probably expand and the threat could rise as we get closer in time to that Thursday time frame. So kind of just the early warning here. Excuse me. But go ahead and just be prepared for that potential. Now, as for kind of the ingredients for severe weather, I don't think Thursday is going to be the end of it, folks. This is this evening. Notice some ingredients beginning to align for severe weather down into Texas. Then we get into Christmas afternoon right here and lower conditions for severe weather. But then here comes that Thursday threat, and you'll notice a big blossoming of ingredients for strong to severe storms in East Texas, portions of Louisiana, even down into Oklahoma and Arkansas. And then through the weekend, we continue to get these little bursts of severe weather ingredients. By the time we get to next Sunday, Monday, some of that even working into Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and maybe even Florida and South Carolina by about a week or so from now. Now, it's after that we can start talking about the exciting stuff, the snowy stuff, the cold weather, the stuff that, you winter weather fans, including myself, are probably going to be a little more interested in. So let's go ahead and break it down. Now, this is this coming Sunday morning, the 29th of December, and I think it's at this point onward that we begin to see the beginning of the pattern change. And I want you to focus, you see this little storm energy up here into the Pacific Northwest at this time frame. I think that's going to be what triggers the pattern change. This is likely, and I'll move it ahead just in a second, but to kind of cross the country, and behind it, what it's going to do is usher in cold air from Canada, and that should start the cooler, stormier pattern. So here we go into late next weekend, early next week. That little piece of energy dives on through the country, and by the time we're getting into kind of the first couple days of January on the GFS ensembles, you'll notice big troughing right into the central part of the country, but then a little bit of the southeast ridge begins to poke its head, at least on the GFS at this time frame. And what this setup would generally favor is kind of a cutter path, low pressure forming down towards Texas and then kind of cutting up through the country. And that could produce big time winter weather right into here, into the central part of the country and up into the Midwest, but would produce just good old fashioned rain into the Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, and much of the Northeast, at least for this first stormy time period, into the first couple of days of January, and that kind of works on through. And then finally, as we get a little bit further ahead into time, kind of towards the end of the first week of January, then the GFS moves this trough east a little bit, kicks back that ridge, and really at that point, just about anyone in the eastern half of the lower 48 and up into eastern Canada would run the risk of wintry weather. And I'll tell you folks, this is borderline, almost a polar vortex look, with just this big lobe of cold air kind of getting displaced southward a little bit and bringing that cold air with it down south. So that's something we'll need to watch. That's the GFS ensembles. Well, what about the European ensembles? Obviously, the GFS not the only model we use here, and a little bit different. So starting at the same time frame, here's that storm that kind of starts the pattern change this weekend, starting in the Pacific Northwest, then kind of crossing down into the lower 48. And like I mentioned, that could produce some winter weather, maybe even severe weather. Again, it's going to be right between the two pattern changes, so that could really do a little bit of both. But it's behind it that the cold air rushes in, and notice this favorable trough placement. I mean, this is a very favorable look for snowfall into the eastern half of the country. Again, the GFS had a bit of a ridge in here, so it would have been a little bit more favorable for a low pressure track like this, but the European, much more favorable and has a lot closer to more of a Miller A look, where you get low pressure to develop down along the Gulf Coast and then kind of ride up the East Coast. And that's what you want to see if you want snow in the Carolinas, the Mid-Atlantic, up into the Northeast. That would be a much more favorable look. And the GFS, or excuse me, the European rather, gets it going quicker. This is the first couple of days of January. Right here is the 3rd, the 4th, into the 5th. And then notice also kind of has a little bit of that polar vortex look as we get into the end of the first week of January, with a big block of cold air working southward and bringing the boom with it, if you will. So let's kind of take a look at some of these operational models and see how they're lining up with their ensembles. We'll start with the GFS, and we'll kind of skip ahead a little bit past where we looked at in the near term. Here we go. This is Friday, Thursday. Here's the Thursday storm I mentioned. That could produce some severe weather. GFS showing that well. That moves up into the east, brings warm air and some rain with it. And then watch the weekend, very kind of snowy and stormy out into the Pacific Northwest as that next big storm system works on through. And notice it ejects out of the Rockies. And by the time we get about a week from now, this is what's going to start the pattern change. Could bring snow with it into somewhere in the country. Again, a week out, we'll see. Could also bring severe weather here on the warm side. Again, we've got warm, humid air in the east continuing out ahead of this thing. So this one could be a potent storm, folks. Go ahead and be prepared for that as we're starting the new year. And then it's after this one that the cold air rushes in. Notice that blue 540 line working south, and our storm track begins much further south. And the GFS, about 10 days from now, starts a snowstorm down into the southern plains. And from here on out, I'm going to go ahead and stop the map here. This is about 10 days out, and everything after this is more than 10 days. And I posted this on Twitter. I'll say it out loud here. Anything after 10 days, and really arguably anything after 7 days, is not meant for a forecast. In fact, we'll even say anything after 7 days. We're not using that as a pinpoint on who's going to see the snow, who's going to see the rain, who's going to see the severe weather. What we're doing is looking for a pattern recognition. So what I mean by that is we can look at, is there cold air? Is there warm air? What does the storm track look like? Those are the things we're looking for in this time frame. We're not looking at the map and saying, all right, okay, Kansas City's going to get a big snowstorm in 10 days. It's not the smart way of doing it. So from this point onward, again, just kind of get an idea of what the map is showing, not who's seeing exactly what, but where the general storm track is, where the general cold air is, and how the pattern looks. So the GFS matches its ensembles well, folks. Here we go into that extended time frame. I'm just going to kind of keep on scooting this ahead. Excuse me. Notice what these storm tracks are doing. Once we get about past 10 days, they're forming down here into Texas, and then most of them are kind of riding up like this. So that would bring big time snow potential kind of into the circled area. So that's the GFS. What about the European? Remember, there were differences in the ensembles. The GFS operational and doing a pretty good job of matching its ensembles. The European, well, let's start at the same time frame. This coming weekend, here's our big storm beginning to develop early next week, kind of working out of the Rockies and down into the central part of the country, and a little bit further south on the European than the GFS, thus bringing snow potential a little further south, but also continuing that severe weather potential about, again, 7 or so days from now. Then after that, the cold air becomes established, and on the European, you'll notice a more Miller A-like track, and I'll kind of keep moving this ahead into time. Notice how this storm track is a little bit further south, and some of them kind of getting off the eastern seaboard. That's kind of more what the ensembles were showing. So I think the operational runs are actually doing a pretty good job here of matching their ensembles, and that's what you want to see at this range. Now we just need to get the models to align themselves. and kind of agree with each other, which we're not quite there yet. But what I will say is both models show cold returning at some point during the first half of January. The Europeans a little sooner with it. The GFS is maybe not necessarily later with it, but just in a different location and still keeps some warmth into the southeast compared to the European, who moves that trough a little bit further east. So what is all this going to look like? Well, the next, at least temperature-wise, the next, probably 7 or 10 days is going to be pretty warm in the east. I'll just move this ahead. This is Christmas afternoon into the 26th. This is the 27th. 28th. I'll just keep on going here, and you'll notice from the 28th all the way out until about here, the 1st of January, most of us staying warm, especially in the east. Then the pattern change happens. The first little shot of cold air happens the first couple of days of January, at least on the European. And again, the GFS has this kind of block of cold air a little bit further up this way. So the GFS is going to have the cold in here. The European has it a little bit further south and east. So do note that difference between the models. But either way, you get the idea. One shot of cold air to start January, and then later on in January, it locks in. And by the time we get about a week or so into the new year, really much of the lower 48 getting that cold air, as the models are hinting at maybe some sort of piece of the polar vortex moving down. Obviously, well out into time, and things can change, but that's at least what they're showing right now. Climate Prediction Center, the experts, it's not just a college kid telling you this. I can guarantee you that. They agree. The next 6 to 10 days, like I showed you, gonna be pretty warm, but we start 2024 and notice a bit of a cool down, and then we get about 10 days or so into 2024, and yeah, a big cool down likely here into the, or really into much of the country here. You're seeing that blue show up in the long range, and obviously that would generally support more snowfall. Now, we need to get the storms to kind of line up with this and, do what you want them to do for wherever you're at, and that'll be its own challenge, but I'm feeling pretty confident at least we're going to have cold air return to start the new year. All right, final thing I'll show you, this is snowfall, and again, this is not meant to be taken as a literal forecast, but just a general pattern check. Now through the 30th of December, all the snow really going to be contained to the Rockies, and everything you see here basically is already fallen just now from our current snow system, but it's after that we get into the new year and notice snowfall chances increasing into much of the country and working south. And again, this is not to say that St. Louis, Missouri is going to get 2 inches of snow between now and the 8th of January. This is to say that the pattern becomes more favorable to start January. Again, you see that snow kind of blossoming, meaning more ensemble members are showing a snowier track. And obviously, who exactly sees the snow? That's its own challenge we'll figure out when we get there. But just noting here, the pattern is more favorable, and the GFS ensemble showing the same thing. Now through the new year, all the snow really in the Rockies, and a lot of it, I'll add. And then after that, snowfall chances increasing into the eastern half of the country, through the plains, and even into some places pretty far south. Alrighty, folks, that's all I got for you on this Christmas Eve. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully we have our fingers crossed for some sort of snowfall to start the new year. I know personally I would love to see some good snow in the Carolinas, and I'm sure many of you watching would love to see that wherever you are as well. Alrighty, folks, have a Merry Christmas. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.